Welcome back to Between the Headlines. Now, I need to apologize for the drama yesterday in the chat. I guess everybody has a bad day sometimes. I talked to Paul Panda. He's a little upset. I did have to pull his wrench. But I explained to him, look, I don't want the focus of every show to be, everybody not getting along in the chat. The chat is important, and this is where you guys get to talk to each other, and we all just need some time to cool off and refresh, right? And so I hope he understands that for now. Not to say he'll never be a moderator again, but as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to having a YouTube channel, and one of those parts is the chat. Now, we do have chat rules, and I didn't really explain the chat rules clearly to Paul, so I don't blame him. He's not a bad person. He has been on the channel for 8 years or longer, and it's just that things have changed. Okay, there's certain things I don't allow in the chat anymore that I used to allow, and there's other things that I allow that I don't allow anymore. One of those things is talking about or focusing on. It's okay to mention something, but when we get off on these side tangents, if you let it, well, the shape of the earth can be the topic that overruns the chat, and then everybody's talking about that and they're not listening to the show, which is why we're all here, right? So I discourage that. And so Tom, I was able to tell him what the goals of the channel were in terms of the chat, and he's well aware of it. I tell him he should almost never block people unless someone is just outright belligerent and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And so, you can call it censorship, but that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to create an environment for everybody to be able to voice their opinion, even if that opinion disagrees with what we're talking about. But if we do it politely, right? So it's a fine balance, and I'm sorry for the people that felt upset yesterday. I know a couple of people said they unsubscribed because of this moderator. So apparently, he upset a lot of people. So that's been fixed. We'll just move on from there. And again, sorry for the drama. Now, there have been some developments in the headlines that I'd like to take a look at today with you guys. And our top story has to be this one. Pull this headline up here so you guys can see this. New York patient becomes the first woman to possibly be cured of HIV. Now, this is interesting because they made it a point to say that she was a woman and that she was of mixed color, as if that was important for some reason. What I feel like these people do is they're always playing to us. They're always patronizing us, aren't they? And they probably put that in there so they can get a point on the color board, because they always like, playing to people's color and things like that to make it look like they're responsible. So now they're going to say, oh, it was under Bo Jiven that this happened, and he does love people of color. This is how I read into these things. Like, why would they even mention her color? But needless to say, there's something going on with this, because after billions of dollars in research over the last 50 years, they're now saying that they have a cure for AIDS. Now, we were just talking about this, weren't we? Stories started circulating that they were going to use the Smaxine mRNWA to try and cure AIDS. Now, this article doesn't mention mRNWA technology, and you guys know what I'm talking about. If you don't, Tom will help you in the chat. But it does say that this cure came from stem cell transplants. I guess they did like a bone marrow transplant and a full blood transplant, and were able to cure this woman. But I can tell you this, they are doing animal studies using mRNWA Smaxine technology to prevent HIV. So this is the segue, I'm thinking, and that at some point the Smaxine will become the gateway to this cure, and this will be the big win that they hang their hat on. This will be the thing that they say, hey, we had to go through VidCo because look what came out of it, a cure for AIDS. Even though almost nobody has AIDS anymore, they're going to say, we finally did it. It all paid off. Now, this sounds very suspicious to me, that this cure just so happened to happen on Mr. AIDS himself, Ouchie, who was all connected into the smack scenes and Vidco and all this. And now he's seeing in his lifetime his biggest nemesis being cured. I mean, this just doesn't sit right with me. Now, of course, he's coming out. Ouchie is saying, oh, you know, this isn't a real therapy that can be widespread to the underserved communities. So this really isn't a real cure. This is a very expensive procedure. We're talking that only really the top 5% could probably afford. So this is not a widespread cure. Now, why would he say something like this? Well, I believe he's saying that because it's a segue and a setup into the smack scene, in AIDS smack scene, that they can then run with and say, look, you can prevent it from happening in the first place with this. So it almost seems like he's setting that up, doesn't it, in his comments here. Well, let's read this article. This is important. The American research team reported that it has possibly cured HIV in a woman for the first time. Building on past successes as well as failures in the cure research field, the scientists used a cutting-edge stem cell transplant method that they expect will expand the pool of people who will receive similar treatments to several dozen annually. Oh, it's only several dozen people annually. And it's largely because this is a very expensive procedure. We're talking probably $1 million procedure. Their patients stepped into a rarefied club that includes 3 men whom scientists have cured or very likely cured of HIV. Researchers also know of 2 women whose own immune systems have quite extraordinarily apparently vanquished the virus. Carl, director of the Division of AIDS, one of multiple divisions who's part of this division, told NBC that the accumulation of repeated apparent triumphs in curing HIV continues to provide hope. It's important that there continues to be success along this line. In the first case of what was ultimately deemed a successful cure, investigators treated the American Timothy Ray Brown for acute myeloid leukemia. He received stem cell transplant from a donor who had rare genetic abnormality that grants the immune cells that blah, blah, blah. So this is just more word sandwiches. And so this is what they're now claiming. On the heels of the Vidco spam-demic, now they have a cure for AIDS. Now, we've got another first for today to talk about. And this time, it's the first time that a gun manufacturer has been successfully sued. $73 million sued for how somebody used one of their guns. In this case, Remington and Handy Sook. Now, because of the sensitivity of this topic, we have to use words, code words, right? And we probably can't read this, but I'll just summarize it for you. Because we all knew that Handy Sook was the beginning of the end with regards to the erosion of gun rights in America. All of us will remember how hard they pushed. Remember? And it reminded me of something. It reminded me, back then in 2012, how hard they pushed with that and all the things that came out of that. It reminded me of how hard they are pushing with the smack scene. You can always feel the agenda on the back of your neck when you look in the media and you see how hard they're pushing for something. That's when you see these agendas, okay? And it's sustained. They usually last several years, and then they move on to something else. So the effects of what happened in 2012 at Handy Sook, they're still being felt today, aren't they? And they will be felt for a very long time because this is a game changer. The ability to sue a manufacturer of pop sticks, because this opens the floodgates of the beginnings of the end for the people that make guns. Why? Because all it takes is a series of operations that are false, right? To put anybody they want out of business. All it takes is a targeted effort. And once they've made ground putting a bunch of these pop stick manufacturers out of business, then they will then make the case to the public to be able to just do away with them altogether. And that's where all this is headed, you guys. So that's about enough of that article. Let's get on to this next article here. Because now they're saying inflation is a great thing. It's good. This is the business opportunity of a lifetime. Sounds like a bad infomercial, doesn't it? But you know what? People will still fall for this stuff. Let's read this article so we can laugh about how out of touch these people are. They have no idea how much low and middle income households have been affected by this. How our grocery bills have gone up 30 and 40%. And along with everything else, all the other goods and services. In some cases, you're talking a quarter of people's spending or their income has gone up by this inflation. And if they're trying to sell us on this is no big deal thing, what does that tell us? It tells us they don't take it seriously and they won't try to stop it, right? Let's read this. Inflation? Oh yeah, I'm old enough to remember. As I'm sure you are. Inflation numbers came out red hot on Thursday with prices for the month of January rising to an annualized rate of 7.5%. Now, understand this number is a very, they're basically using smoke and mirrors here. It's actually much higher, but what they do is they spread it out across all the products and services. A lot of things have not gone up, but all the things that matter to the lower and middle class people have gone up. Okay? Some things haven't gone up, and so then they equalize that out. So this number is actually much higher. So in other words, you go to the grocery store, everything costs 20 to 30% more. That's what affects people on our level, on the low end. Okay? This guy says, this is a big shock to me. When I hear the inflation rate is highest in 40 years, that really causes some concerns about the challenge of the U.S. economy. So I think it's worth going back 4 decades or so to see what caused inflation then and how it was tamed and its collateral effects, and to see how all that applies today. First, just a note on how unfamiliar this is. Let's agree that you're not aware of economic phenomenon like inflation until you're, say, 10 years old. Therefore, no American under the age of 50 has really experienced inflation, which means that 213 million Americans, 2/3, have never lived with inflation. In fact, most of us are used to goods and services getting even cheaper. So, here they show the inflation. Bacon inflation stands out amid staples over the last 40 years. Let's now hop in the hot tub time machine and travel back to the last time we faced inflation. Students of economic history may recall reading about those win or whip inflation now buttons the government sent out. Was that in 1982? No, the buttons came out years earlier, which speaks to the potentially alarming point. By February 1982, inflation was on the downswing. Economists were delighted with that month's numbers of 7.6%, a 4-year low. So basically going over the history of inflation, trying to make us feel like, oh, this is no big deal. They also talk about business opportunities for those who want to leverage inflation so they can make more money. Now, of course, that favors people that have the money to invest, right? Doesn't favor people who are just getting by month to month, which is the majority of America. So yeah, there are some business opportunities for people who have money, but that doesn't help the rest of us. So let's get into this next article, because there's other things that they're trying to repackage as great. This is fun and great. Inflation and tracking people. Surveillance. Here's a New York Times article. I used Apple AirTags, tiles, and GPS tracker to watch my husband's every move. Now, of course, this is about the normalization of these kinds of activities to make you feel at ease about being tracked and surveilled, to make you okay with how the new world will be run. And they try to lessen the blow in this article with a little bit of humor, bad humor at that. Let's read this. Mid-January, my husband and I were having an argument. 1-year-olds had tested positive for vidco. Of course, they got to throw that in there, right? More fear. And occasionally grunted between breaths. I called urgent care, was told to take her to the emergency room. But because I had been up all night with her, I was too exhausted to drive. I'm worried, I told my husband. We need to take her to the hospital. Doctors always tell us to take the baby to the ER whenever we call about anything, he replied, exacerbated. She is fine. She is eating and playing and happy. So basically, he's having a disagreement with his wife about the severity and the urgency of their 1-year-old who apparently, this story sounds fake. This is fake. It's got to be. Anyway, she ended up monitoring her own husband as he went to the hospital just to see if he was really going to take her to the hospital. Why wouldn't a mother go to the hospital with her child? He eventually caved and set out for the hospital a half hour later. That's how you know the story's fake. No mother would just let the dad take the baby to the hospital without going with them, because mothers are the closest thing to their child, right? So she monitored him and tracked him to make sure he was going where he was going. But then here's where the humor comes in. I realize I sound like the worst wife ever, so let me explain. It was for journalism. Apple released sleek AirTags early last year as a way to keep track of keys and purses. Given the company's history of introducing products, such as the original iPhone, that led to mass adoption, AirTags could well lead consumers to location track everything all the time. So do you see what they're doing here? They're basically selling these products so everyday people can basically harass their friends and family and partners. This is what they're doing. They're trying to normalize this. Just like how back when drones came out, personal drones, and they really sold those as toys. They wanted to get everybody accustomed to it and desensitized to it, so that when you saw a drone flying overhead, surveilling you, it was no big deal anymore. So this article goes on to basically sell all these products. It has a full description of the product, how it's used, how fun it could be in this article. Unbelievable. The programming. Let's get into this next story. Another USA Today article. And once again, USA seems to be running a lot more fact-based stories that reflect the truth behind how people really feel about where we're at with this spam-demic. Doctors are now upset about kids being masked in schools. Let's read this one. Now, one of my jobs out of college, I worked at a printing plant, I told you guys, and they used to print USA Today. It wasn't my account, but it was in the building. And I remember people would always make fun of USA Today and Newsweek as some kind of marginal, magazine. But, we've covered a lot of stories on here where they're actually starting to talk about the truth and the facts and how people really feel about all this stuff. Let's read this article there. Fatigue and frustration are setting in 2 years into the vidco outbreak. And a growing chorus of doctors, parents, and state officials are calling for an end to the school mask mandates. The issues have long divided America across the nation, spurring intense debates and demonstrations at school board meetings, propelling legal battles, and emerging as a focal point of state elections. But a national conversation around an off-ramp to masking in schools has accelerated in recent days as the Omicron wave recedes. Multiple states have taken action to phase out statewide school mask mandates, and a number of high-profile medical professionals have changed their tunes on the matter. Wonder why that is. Wonder if a lot of these people are getting sued. I wonder if the doctors are seeing things on the ground in real time that are not being reported. Now, even here on the channel, there have been anecdotal stories of people who are sharing things that their doctors are telling them that don't quite line up with the narrative. Alarming things I can't mention here, but alarming trends about what they're seeing on the ground. Doctors. Let's keep reading here. One cohort points to the increasing access to Smack the Nation for children and declining VidCo cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. Another group argues long-term masking puts an outsized burden on the kids with consequences to their mental health and possibly to their development. Now, we did see this in the statistics for 2020 and I believe 2021, that there was this ideation of harming one's self amongst this age group, which just saddens me to the core because of the effects of the entire situation with the spam-demic. So, they go on to say here, you cannot sustain a red alert, all hands on deck emergency kind of response indefinitely. Yes, that is true. Far, far beyond the 2 weeks we were promised, right? So, basically, they're making the case here. This next article talks about how the parents are really feeling. Some Southwest Illinois parents are putting immense pressure on schools over the masks. So we know this is happening. It's finally being admitted and acknowledged. But the damage has already been done, with fully well over half of America being fully Smack the Nation. Now, even as the country starts to pull away from the new normal, medical tyranny is still in effect in some holdout states. New York fires 1,000 workers. Now, they understand that when you do this to someone, it literally destroys their life. There are a good number of these people who will probably have a very difficult time finding a new job. Okay? And this is why they keep pumping up this thing in the media saying that they need workers, they need workers. They want people to believe, oh, it's no big deal that we fire them. They'll just find another job. That's not the case. The workers that they're having trouble finding are the low-wage workers. So, you get fired from your nursing job or your city job making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, and then you got to go work for $25,000 a year or $20,000 a year at a minimum wage job. This is literally what's happening in America. The middle and higher paying jobs are no longer around. So all these workers got fired, and even though we are starting to, or they want us to believe that we're going back to a new normal. All right. Let's get into some other stuff. Now, we had talked a lot about this falling from high places meme, haven't we? We identified this weird phenomenon that's been happening. People falling out. Falling, hitting their head, jumping out of windows, falling out of windows, falling off of high places. And I began to wonder what this was all about. I'm believing this has a lot to do with the fallen angels, or the head wound that the Antichrist will receive and then be healed from. Now, since we discussed this last, because we just covered this last week, this falling meme, we had Mary J. Blige fall out on the stage to end the halftime show. Here she is here, falling out on the stage. Just crazy. And I'm shocked that I didn't notice this immediately. But there was a lot to this Super Bowl halftime show. Remember Dre Day? Well, D alphanumerically is 4. DD 44. And guess what day of the year that this halftime show happened? On the 44th day of the year. 44 and 44 is 88. So, a lot going on in this halftime show. I'm sure there will be more things that come to light over the next weeks and months. But here's Mary J. Blige falling out on the floor during the halftime show. And here's another falling story. This woman was a skier. I don't know if it was woman or man. We'll have to read this. This is out of the Idaho Statesman. And the 27-year-old skier falls to his, it's a man, falls to his death at the Grand Teton National Park. Lots and lots of falling stories. Look at the Grand Tetons. Those mountains are almost straight up and down, aren't they? That is just nuts. Many of you been to the Grand Tetons before? 27-year-old skier from Jackson, Wyoming fell in Death Canyon on... Wow, he actually fell on first day of Lupercalia, February 13th. And a climber in the canyon reported seeing him fall in the Apocalypse Callure. Wow. Skiers and snowboarders describe the Callure as a highly technical, dangerous gully in the national park. Park rangers rushed to help Spencer, but resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. He died from his injuries. Wow, that's crazy. They think that avalanche was likely the cause, even though the risk for avalanche was considered low. Now, get into this next story. I promise to keep you guys updated on Prince Andrew and everything going on with that. And apparently, he settled with the lead victim, I call her, Virginia Giuffre. Now, I have my doubts about this whole way they handled this, why Virginia Giuffre became the lead victim, the one that everybody focused on, because I'm a little skeptical about all of this. Now, nobody knew exactly how much she got. There are estimates between 10 and 70 million. And they're saying that part of that money is going to go to some kind of foundation to help fight for girls who go through this. Anytime you hear about a foundation or charity, understand that money is being laundered, okay? That's just what happens. So that right there off the bat makes me very skeptical. The other thing that makes me skeptical is basically Prince Andrew in his statement does not really admit to anything he did. The only thing he got out of this is he saved himself from a trial, he saved himself from jail time, and more embarrassment for the royal family. But, did he admit to anything? No. It almost comes across as, hey, I'm sorry what happened to you, even though I had nothing to do with it. And so I'll do my part to at least raise awareness. And I admit guilt that I was hanging out with Egg Stain, which was a bad decision. And so here's some money to make us all feel better about that and to admit my mistake about that. That's how this all came through. So this is just really weird to me. And so now the book gets closed on this, and they want us to believe the saga is over. But here's what upsets me about this. That they chose Virginia to be the focus, the poster child of everything that happened with this as a 17-year-old victim. Now, understand that in many countries, 17 is legal. And I feel like that they put her in the lead, and that this was done intentionally to basically bring up the debate over the age of consent. I feel like there were many, many other victims that were 13 and 14 years old at the time of the violation, and they should have been given the spotlight. It would have made a much stronger case about the problem, wouldn't it have? Instead of 17. So, there's something afoot here. This is all being washed over. She got paid. And we didn't even find out about all these other names of the people who who did these things. We're talking hundreds of people who perpetrated these things, and none of them are coming to light. So, this is now a big nothing sandwich. Now, let me go back in the chat, make sure you guys are with me, and we'll get into some of these last stories for today. All right, looks like you guys are here. Very good. And then I'll be in the chat, and we can talk about some of this stuff. All right, so we've covered Prince Andrew. Now let's get into this story. And this story's creepy, because this little girl was found under the stairs in a home. She was missing for 2 years. We all remember the movie The People Under the Stairs. So she was basically trapped in the wall under these stairs. And before we read this, remember that we've been talking a lot about people being trapped in walls. And we identified another meme, the meme of people in the walls, and all of a sudden all these news stories started coming out about people trapped in walls. Weren't there? And with the eyes we've been given, we identified the scripture in Ezekiel about the abominations hidden in a hole in the wall that was shown to Ezekiel by God. And in that passage, God talks about Tammuz, the cult of Tammuz, which is the false Christ, the false cross, and the weeping for Tammuz in this cult. Let's read about this, what happened to this little girl, and then we'll get into a little bit more about what is going on with these things in the walls. Now, the first thing I noticed is she's holding up 666. You guys are probably screaming it in the chat. She's holding up 666. Yes, she is. It seems to be done on purpose. And look at the low quality of this photo. It's all glitched out. So there's something weird going on. This doesn't even look real right here. But let's keep reading here. Saugerties, New York. More than 2 years after she disappeared, a 6-year-old girl was found stashed under the staircase of a home in eastern New York. Case broke Monday night. A detective pried open the staircase and found Paisley Schultes in a small, cold, and wet secret room. She was hiding with her biological, non-custodial mother in a Fawn Road home, according to the town of Saugerties police. Now, the depravity, I should say, of society has come to an all-time low. And I believe a lot of that was spawned out of the desperation of the spam-demic, as well as the fear and media and what people are exposed to. What possible explanation could these people give for this happening to this little girl? Let's keep reading here. Police arrested Paisley's biological parents, who did not have custody of her and had been suspected of abducting her. Why would your own parents abduct you? That's just crazy. Saugerties police initially said Paisley disappeared in Cayuga Heights in Tompkins County, but Cayuga Heights police said Tuesday that was untrue. The police said in a Facebook post in 2020 that Paisley went missing in Spencer Village in Tioga County. Saugerties police could not be reached for clarification Tuesday. She had last been seen with Kim Cooper and Kirk Schultes. Multiple police agencies had investigated numerous leads about Paisley's disappearance, including several that led police to the Saugerties house, but each time police checked it out, the resident denied any knowledge of the girl's whereabouts. She just disappeared. So, why would their parents pretend like she was missing? I mean, was there some kind of GoFundMe they were doing? I mean, what was going on here? So they took her to the police station. She was met by paramedics. She was in good health, released to her legal guardian. Look at this. This is creepy. Here's an actual... Whoa. And there's a panda in there, which of course represents... We all know what the panda represents. The raccoon eyes, the sick child. And that is just creepy. Look at the state of this house. This is the stairwell here, if you're not getting your bearings about what we're looking at here. This is the stairwell, and it's opened up. It's got hinges. And no, those aren't hinges. It's just like a thing that goes in there. And they pulled the stair away. And that's where this little girl was hiding with her mom. Whoa, look at that. Okay, you guys see that? Now, for those of you with eyes to see and who have been following this channel, what is the significance of this boot on the stairs right here? What's the significance? There's so much symbolism in this picture here. Now, I hadn't looked at this. This is brand new information. I didn't even see this article. Notice how it's on Valentine's Day, February 14th. Well, what does that shoe mean? Somebody's going to get this right away. Let's let this chat catch up. Unbelievable. What does the shoe mean? Now, you can put it in the chat. I might not be able to read what you put, but you guys can type it out in the chat so everyone else knows what that boot means. Yes, somebody got it. I call them Hom tanks. Basically, what they call this, when a single shoe is missing, all parents know that it's called an orphan because it's missing shoe, just like a missing child. They call the shoe that's missing an orphan, and they put it away until they can find the other shoe and match it back up, right? But look at this, the abomination in the wall, which would be what happened to this girl. What is that? Can't zoom that in quite enough. There's something red right here around the nose of the panda. But we all know what the panda means as well. We've seen this repeated over and over in the symbolism. There's something not right in this situation. Much more to this story than meets the eye. Something out of place. Yeah, I think so. Police said Schultes, the girl's biological father, resurfaced shortly after Paisley's disappearance and denied knowledge of his daughter's whereabouts and told police that he had not seen her since 2019. During some follow-ups at the Fawn Road home, police said Schultes Jr. and his father allowed officers limited access to look around the home, knowing the child and her abductor were hidden within the house and would not be found. I mean, this is like a bad movie. Here's another picture here. We could zoom this up. What the heck is that? Oh, it's like a hair thing. Like a hair barrette or something. So, basically, this is like a bad movie. This is like someone locked in a room and they're trying to scream for help and they can't get help, even though they hear the police officers in the house looking for them. Imagine the horror of this little girl. This is just really sad, you guys. The mystery of Paisley's whereabouts was solved Monday, though, when police went to Schultes' home on a tip that Paisley was being held there. At 8:06 p.m., the state police took a search warrant to the house. Schultes Sr. allegedly told police he did not know where Paisley was, and he had not seen her since she was reported missing. They'd been searching the house for more than an hour when Detective Eric Thiel noticed something odd about the way the steps were built on the staircase leading from the back of the home to the basement. Something was out of place. Wow, this guy's a hero. Detective Eric Thiel. There are good police out there, you guys. In situations like this, anyway. Thiel shined a flashlight through a crack between the wooden steps and saw that what he thought was a blanket. The staircase seemed solid, police said, but they grabbed a tool to remove several of the wooden steps. They then saw a pair of tiny feet. And after removing several more steps, they found Paisley and Cooper. Cooper, 33, oh, of course she's 33, was charged with second-degree custodial interference, endangering the welfare of a child. She was also wanted an arrest warrant issued through Ulster County. Now, understand, there are some very sophisticated crimes going on. What would be okay, let's go back in the chat. What would be the incentive for some parents to claim that their child was missing? Now, think about money here. Not just getting sympathy from other people, but think about someone with a lot more money and power approaching a family. Yes, take the step, Red Storm. Great analysis there. Think about rich and powerful people wanting children who are off the books, so to speak, and how much they would pay for that. This is how some of these victims, these nameless victims, basically, that don't even know their real name, no social security number. This is exactly how you do it, right? You would pretend like your child's missing, let several years go by, and then they probably would sell that child to the highest bidder. We're talking big money here. Tens of thousands of dollars. This is what I think's happening here. This is, what I think the real story is behind this. And if the people in this police department are watching this, you might want to look into these people's computers and everything else to see who they were talking to and what their incentive would be to do this to this child. Now, if you don't think people sell their own children, there are people out there who have children just to sell them. And this could be some kind of ring. This could be going on across the entire United States. Anytime someone says a child is missing, don't just assume that that's what's really happened. Look into that parent and find out if there's a child around or there's some kind of incentive. I mean, look at how these people were living. That should be their first clue. Look at how these people were living. That should be your first clue that something is afoot. Let's go back up to this picture. This picture shows more of the living conditions. Discolored walls, nothing's clean. Now let's keep going down here, because I saw the number 57. Of course there's a number 57, right? So they got charged, and I think that's the end of the story. These people need to look much deeper into this situation. There's a much more to this than it meets the eye. Now, I know everybody's been following this story about this animal. No one could identify. They found it. This woman found it in Pennsylvania. And they took it to the animal shelter. And animal control didn't know what it was. We've been following this story. Many of you thought it was a greyhound or a dog with really bad mange. Well, here's the update. They figured out what this thing was, this unidentified creature, and it wasn't a dog. Now, here's the kicker. This thing escaped from its cage. It gnawed through a window and escaped. So we went from timid, hopeless, scared animal to aggressive escape artist. So, what is this thing? It's a coyote. They ran DNA tests on it before it escaped and found out that it's actually a coyote with some probably pretty bad mange. Let's read this. A mysterious creature that escaped from Pennsylvania Rehabilitation Center has been identified, but the location of the four-legged animal remains unknown. Nearly a month after the animal, believed to be either a dog or coyote, was found in freezing temperature outside a woman's home, it has officially been identified as a coyote. Wildlife Works in Mount Pleasant said on Monday, February 14th, oh, see what's going on here? Lupercalia. February 14th, the dog. DNA sampling was done to properly identify the creature. But before those tests came back, the animal escaped in late January from the Wildlife Organization when it destroyed its cage, trashed the hospital area, left scratches on the walls, and fled through a window in the center by chewing through the seal. Still no sightings, though. Thinking is long gone, wildlife rehabilitator Morgan Barron told TribLive.com. Barron initially believed the animal was a dog because of its timid and non-aggressive actions. She said in an interview with Trib Live, the coyote became more defensive in the days that led to its escape. Yeah, he wanted to go back with his pack. Christina had found the animal outside her Fairfield Township home in mid-January, and she kept the animal in her basement as it was freezing, skittish, and scared. After a rescue organization was called to the home, Wildlife Works eventually stepped in to help identify and care for the creature. They said DNA results identified it as a coyote on Monday. Wow, what a crazy update on that story. Escaped coyote. Well, at least I guess he got a full belly. But it's so weird how they did that story on Lupercalia. Now, here's our last story of the day, and this is another creepy story. This is just so weird. What is the government doing with billions of pounds of cheese? Now, I did read this story beforehand because I was like, what is this about? Look at this. Deep in the caves of Missouri, the U.S. government has stored 1.4 billion pounds of cheese for decades. We're not just talking cheddar either. The cave has Swiss, American, and many others. Funny that government and private agencies are sitting on a cheese mine in Missouri when over in New York there's a bagel and schmear crisis. This insane reserve of cheese was actually started because of a surplus, the intention of it being used for those in need. Back in the 1970s, the U.S. government started buying up cheese to help out farmers. But then farmers actually started producing too much, so the government had to figure out what to do with everything that was left. Now I remember this in the 70s and early 80s because we used to get free cheese because we were low income. And we get, I think there was peanut butter too, if I remember correctly, and butter. Those are like the three things that you got from the government. Government cheese. Now the cheese was nasty. Came in like a giant block, and I remember just, even back then as a kid, just not liking it. I think they gave out honey too. Anyway, they used to give out a lot of food. The government would do this. And so this brings back some memories. But now we know why, because the government was subsidizing these farmers to produce all this stuff, and then there was too much. So what was the solution? Well, these government assistance programs, food assistance programs that would distribute millions of pounds of dairy products. However, that wasn't enough to deplete the surplus, so then big business got involved. Semi-public marketing board was formed, and the government started making deals with fast food companies to sell the cheese and make some cheddar. This marketing board is actually responsible for the creation of the Got Milk campaign that had celebrities sporting milk mustaches and the rest of us chugging back 2%. Now, there's an interesting story surrounding this Got Milk thing. When my daughter was little and I was fast asleep, they were recruiting children for these Got Milk commercials. And back then, we thought that the pinnacle of success was getting your child involved in acting. And she was, I think, 5 or 6 years old at the time. Anyway, they were recruiting out of the local mall. So my wife and I took our daughter down there, and she's just as cute as a button. And she got picked up. So they are like, well, would you come back for a second interview? And we're like, sure. So we went to San Francisco to this high-rise building up in such and such floor. I don't remember what floor it was. And they're like, we really like your daughter. We want her to be in the Got Milk commercials. And I remember talking to my wife at the time, and there's something didn't sit right. They were like, basically, they were telling us that if we wanted to do this, we basically had to hand our daughter over to them. That there would be all these hours that she would have to work, and that we'd have to be willing to, travel somewhere at the drop of a dime and all this. And fortunately, her mother at the time was not game, because I can only imagine the life track she would have been on had we had her included in that. Because obviously, now I know that milk is human sacrifice. That's what it is. Lupercalia, mixing of blood and milk. That's what this has always been about. So, dodged a bullet there. But this is why we need to always be looking at this esoteric stuff so we can dodge these bullets. Because most people think, had I said all these things back then, they would have thought I was crazy. They probably would have put me in a mental ward. But now we know the truth. Because this stuff is all very real. And you should steer as far away from it as possible. Let's keep reading this article. Today, the underground of Missouri holds more than just government cheese. According to the website, Springfield Underground contains 3.2 million square feet of leasable space free from exposure to the outdoor elements. You guys, this is a huge underground facility. What do you think they're going to use this for? Now, southern Missouri is the Ozarks. So, we've heard all the stories about the underground bases there. This seems to fit in with it, all this cheese. The website also explains that the former limestone mine maintains a constant temperature of 62 degrees and offers refrigerated buildings from negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit to 55 degrees. So no need to worry about spoiled Swiss. As grocery prices continue to rise, supply chain issues run rampant, you'd think the U.S. government would put a pause on its cheese stockpiling, but apparently not. As recently as August of 2020, the Department of Agriculture announced cheese purchase program. The program is meant to purchase mozzarella, processed and natural American cheddar cheese for the National School Lunch Program and other federal food nutrition assistance programs. Though the announcement came in 2020, the actual cheese deliveries were intended for the entire year of 2021. Now that I think about it, a government conspiracy makes a lot more sense to me than celebrities genuinely just wanting people to drink more milk. Wow. So the government is stockpiling all this cheese in these underground bases. What could this be about, you guys? What could this be about? Crazy. I think all these underground bases are connected to one another. And maybe Southern Missouri's job is to store all the cheese, and maybe there's another one over here that stores all the meat, and so on and so on. Probably some huge meat freezer, acres and acres of frozen meat. So these elite can live in luxury while the rest of us suffer on the top. I don't know, but that's just weird. Okay. Okay. There are many miles of underground tunnels for truckers to travel. I think they're all connected too, says Meredith. Money, gold, cheese. Maybe it's a cover. You know, these people, hey, all you got to do is replace cheese with a child, right? And then it becomes the hiding, moving, selling, buying, and storing of cheese. And maybe that's what this is. It's a cover story. You never know, you guys. You never know what these people are up to. Plenty of blood and milk. Underground worlds all over the world. Underground roads all over the world. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out. What do we have tomorrow? I don't think we have anything scheduled tomorrow, but I do have a couple shows that I'm going to be looking at today, so we will be back on here tomorrow. If nothing else, we'll do some between the headlines. But, man, what a crazy world we live in, right? Okay, you guys. I love each and every one of you. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care and be safe.